So one of the biggest selling points of Pakatan Harapan's manifesto or promises before GE14 was the promise to reduce the cost of living or to lower the cost of living through the abolishment of tolls, through fuel prices and the works. Now, Lite had put up a poll on their website and it found that 67% of listeners voted that rising cost of living should be the main focus of Pakatan Harapan. In fact, it was the top priority. So we have with us today some of the most prominent journalists in Malaysia to help us make sense of Pakatan Harapan's 1 year in Putrajaya. Now, the question we want to ask today is, are we feeling the pinch when it comes to the rising cost of living, and how much is that affecting our satisfaction or dissatisfaction towards the current government?
I think that is the most sore point in the whole Pakatan Harapan government. Well, I sympathize with them because this cost of living thing has been going up since I can remember. It's never come down. Things change. Okay, they blame it on the GST. So GST was removed, but the SST has actually had some positive effect if you really study it. Apparently, the inflation has been near zero over the last 6 months. This is from the Ministry of Finance. And the increase, they projected a certain amount of revenue from SST, but it's gone up by 20%. Okay, that's for the government. But what do the people get? Nothing. I don't think they see a decrease in prices. Although, if you go to Tesco, you used to pay 6% for the whole bill in the past. I'm a regular Tesco goer. So, this time if you go with SST, you don't see it. But where does the money go? It's not making it easy for us, for the people. So, basically the complaint has been there, it will be there, and I don't think the price will ever come down, because what goes up in Malaysia never comes down. There is a serious problem.
Okay.
I know how government is going to handle it, and I think if you go back to the previous government, a lot of the claim about huge revenue from GST was kind of understated by the refunds. So that is not a true reflection.
Right.
So at least now the government is being a bit honest, and I hope that the government will understand that everyone is talking about the cost of living, every individual.
You don't think that the government is aware or has acknowledged that?
It has acknowledged, but it's lost. Does not know what to do.
Okay.
You can't blame the businesses because they have to survive. You can't blame the ministry for not implementing, because they're doing their best too. But what's happening? I mean, a milk that costs 42 ringgit costs 48 ringgit today after the SST. After the removal of the GST. So where do you go from there?
What do you guys think?
You see, the GST, abolishing GST was item number 1 on the manifesto,
Right.
which they have done. Whether they have achieved it in some way to bring down the cost of living, as Margaret has articulated, it's not happening. Of course, if you talk to the businesses, and in general, SST is the preferred taxation method, because you only tax at one point as opposed to GST, where every level is
That's not
taxed.
true.
But but as Pakran said, we do not see the trickle-down effect of the abolition of the GST. The cost of living is still very high, and the government seems to be very coy in addressing it now, because they don't seem to be able to find a solution or answers as to why the cost of living is still high. So they're looking at other ways of how to make the people better, to make the people happy. In terms, now they're talking about introducing fuel subsidies,
right.
and they're talking about abolishing toll, and but at the same time, we cannot be going into welfare state territory. Now, I was talking to a few senior EXCO members from Selangor, and they said that there's so many welfare policies in Selangor, which is actually eating into the coffers. They only make money from assessment and quit rent, and then free water is costing them 160 million a year. All the other policies, all the other incentives that they're offering for housewives, for debt benefits.
It will be
all that's costing them about 200 million a year.
And I think that's where the balance needs to come in, right? So the measures to address the rising cost of living, at the same time you're trying to plug the gap in the economy so that the government coffers needs to be relooked at. The world economy is not doing very well. So how do you balance trying to mitigate what damage is already done to
Because
government
the removal of
revenue?
GST is to encourage spending. But people are not spending because they still have no money in their pocket to spend.
So the idea is to stimulate the economy,
And
to
yes,
make sure that
and
the
so what is
economy-
happening with that? Is the economy being stimulated? Are new jobs being created? What about wages? Are wages being increased?
Right.
I think they kind of failed in terms of increasing the minimum wage. I think from 1,500 they only managed to raise it to 50 ringgit, I think. If
Right,
not
not to the level that they
Yeah.
said they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think, we can't talk about cost of living without addressing exactly what Darren said, which is that people don't earn enough. And we've remained at this stagnant pay level for decades. And I think
That's
recent studies have already shown that we're talking about pay levels from 20 years ago. And I think that's really a problem for especially those living in the city, but not necessarily only those living in the city. I think that is one of the biggest gaps, and definitely saying that, okay, we remove or we take away some of the subsidies, maybe plugging in some of the gaps through welfare programs will definitely assist those in the lower income bracket. I think that really is useful, but without addressing the fact that we are not actually a dynamic employment market.
Right.
We are not paying people what they deserve. It is a burden that I think a lot of young people are also facing as they come into the job market. And I think, every other person who's driving a Grab is maintaining two jobs, is trying to make a living. So these measures, some of which they've not really implemented, for example, like the toll, abolish the tolls. It may seem small for some, but actually it's a huge cost component for many people who travel. The city is surrounded by tolls. You can't get away from that. And that is a major consideration for people who travel for work. So it will go a long way, but I think you also have to look at the other part, which is our economy able to sustain people on a monthly basis?
Talking about the travel, the government did implement a very small thing, the travel pass.
Travel pass, 100
It's
ringgit.
very
Yeah.
popular,
Yeah.
and it's helping to not a great extent, but slowly. Because there are about 100 over 1,000 subscribers by now.
Simon?
My whole point is, I have got no problem with the cost of living. A growth of a cost of living is necessary for a country to grow.
But are you saying
But
this from a middle income bracket?
No, I am concerned with the lack of growth of salary. Okay, we are being trapped here with the rising cost, which is a natural growth of any economy. When we say inflation has only gone up by 1%, that is 1% over the same period last year. When you keep on measuring it, it'll be 4-5% by the time you do a proper measurement. So things have gone up by 4 or 5%, but have salary kept track? Salary has not kept track. It's about time that if the Pakatan government want to make sure to tackle the cost of living, it has to tackle salary.
But how do they do that without seemingly putting position that they're not pro-business? You know what I mean?
No, look, the whole idea being is that it is a chicken and egg thing. Okay, it's a vicious circle. Do you give money to the people so they can spend, so that the businesses can grow, or you make the businesses grow so hopefully they will give money to the people to spend? I think that won't happen. I think they have to enforce it. Minimum salary wages goes up. You know, if you are X qualifications, the government says you must be paid this amount. In Indonesia, okay, let's put it this way: there is a cost of living allowance you have to pay if you open up an office in Jakarta. It's almost $1,000 US.
But I guess, it's, looking at business owners, Malaysia's economy is made up of SMEs, small businesses that may not be able to survive.
I will also tell you that most of those buying Porsche Cayennes and Ferraris out there are all SME owners.
Okay,
They're not your multi-millionaires and billionaires. Okay, but the whole point is that we are not addressing the salary issue. We are not addressing growth issue, and the finance ministry has confirmed over 2 quarters Malaysia went into deflation. Now, if it's a deflating economy, prices of goods don't come down, because prices of goods are not determined by Malaysia. They're determined internationally. Fuel prices are not determined by Malaysia. Today is $78 US to a barrel on a Brent crude. It was $60 odd when Lite first invited me to come to this video. That's $10 per barrel. You know, they cannot allow the deflation to continue. It sounds good. Deflation brings down the inflation rate. But the inflation rate still grows.
Yeah, with the deflation rate, I think what we need to watch out for is a deflationary spiral. Right?
Yes.
So that's the danger. But I want to come back to the discussion about tax, because tax has been one of the reasons why most Malaysians are not feeling that trickle-down effect from SST. Most Malaysians are feeling the squeeze, and it's really the middle-income Malaysians, right? So, we've got new taxes from everything from the departure levy, the digital tax, sugar tax. So all these things come into play as, especially within the middle-income bracket. I want to talk to you about the introduction or the idea behind that. The government needs to grow its revenue because it needs to find other ways to tax.
And at the same time, it says the government should get out of business. But yet, you're trying to raise.
Well, this is for the federal coffers. It's not quite in business.
What I'm saying is that if the government has adopted a fixed mentality, we will manage the country's economy. Okay, the coffers are going to be stuck there. If the number 1 trillion is exactly correct, it will take years. It shouldn't be done instantly because this country can't take repayment of $1 trillion debt immediately. This country can't take it.
You see, we don't know how much damage 1MDB has done to our coffers. And the government is not revealing everything to us. If you remember the CEP report, at the moment it's under OSA.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe they're trying to do it. They classified it as OSA because they don't want chaos in the streets. They don't want you don't want investors to flee and Malaysians themselves. They don't want to panic on the streets. We don't know, but we don't know exactly what is our fiscal health at the moment. So the government needs to come up with more creative ways, I think, to fill up the coffers. And the moment, as a knee-jerk reaction, all they think of is implementing or introducing new taxes.
Do you think the middle income bracket is being squeezed?
Oh, terrible.
Terrible. No, I think these taxes are kind of targeted. Real estate. Talk of sugar.
It is the sugar tax is something
that worked in many other countries.
The sugar tax is something that was planned by the Health Ministry 5 years ago. It is not new, okay? And it was going to come in anyway. I just came from a golf game with car importer, and he was telling me that custom department officers suddenly came to his office and says, "Look, you haven't paid enough taxes for this X number of vehicles." But he says, you show him letters. Yeah, you didn't see the operative word. The operative word was sementara, temporary tax. So he has to pay the balance. And then he says, okay, when can I need to pay this? He said, yesterday. When did the policy come in? The day before yesterday. That's not the way to run a country.
No, but if I could comment, I think when you talk about the different forms of taxes, I think they also serve different purposes. I think we cannot lump all together and say that this is all about the coffers, because if we talk about the digital tax, it has another background to it, yes. Which is the fact that you have all over-the-top counter services, over-the-top services, and having businesses here with customers here online, and how do you get a piece of that, but also a way of, in a way, it's regulating the economy. Is it fair? Is it not fair? I think it's a conversation we do need to have, because it is a field that needs incentives, because this is the future. This is the economy that is going to influence a lot of other activities. Right. So I think that has a different purpose behind it. But I think when you talk about cost of living, these are things that, okay, should I subscribe to Netflix? I have a choice whether I want to or I don't want to. But your sort of like basic cost of living issues, I think that affects people's access to health, to transportation, to housing. Can you afford to buy a house? And I think that is indeed a problem for many people, not to own houses. I think that requires a different kind of discussion, and where I think, yes, the state has to play its role, because you have to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. and as you said, to generate the level of income that allows people to be able to pay for all of these.
On that note, do you think that under this government that the B40 is being taken care of? So what I'm seeing is that we're hearing complaints within the middle income bracket, but are you seeing a certain kind of social welfare being
No, it's
implemented for B40?
Okay.
We had
It's
the
not
My
enough.
Salam insurance,
No.
do you think that B40 is at least being taken care of?
It is very good PR. It makes a B40 feel very wanted, but it still doesn't address the root issue. They should be given higher salary so they don't need all this. Everybody should have their salary increased, and therefore
Who's going to pay for that, Saiwan?
by productivity, you encourage the productivity. You encourage more investments. You encourage better doing. Not a third car, maybe having set up a car factory here.
So I also think that the private sector, I mean, if there's no incentive or a whip, whichever works better, then there is no, they're not going to take the first step to say, okay, we're going to across the board raise the salary. Where's the incentive to them? And the incentive is also a positive, has a positive outcome for public in general and for the state, right? So I think if you can't, sort of provide those incentives, then you must be able to create some kind of regulatory framework, not one that penalizes them, but one that says that you have fundamental things that you need to protect,
creating social safety nets are always temporary. Okay, you don't want the Pekeling flats to be there forever. You hope, you always pray that the fellows in Pekeling flats, and many of them have very successfully bought their Mercedes-Benz, their BMWs. They now have a second home in Taman Tun. That's what you want to aim for. You don't want to keep the B40s entrapped and beholden to welfare. That should not be the way.
It's not sustainable, actually.
It is very sustainable for politics.
For political reasons, not for the,
It's not for the country.
So when it comes to addressing the rising cost of living, which ministry is in charge?
I think it's across the board.
I think the entire cabinet.
Entire cabinet, actually. I mean, if you link
And
it
are
up,
we seeing
yeah.
that? Because
To be fair, KDNPK have been the consumer ministry has been trying its level best. It's the entire ministry has got worse than 60 years of history. It has probably got 100-year-old technology in how to deal with it. But who is responsible? Actually, I would shift it away to MITI.
To MITI?
International trade.
Yes, and I tell MITI, it's your responsibility to grow the country by 15% so that everyone can have a pay rise.
Partly. But if you talk about cost of living, then the health ministry comes into the picture because of the fact that you have to pay so much for medicines, right?
Yeah.
And so they have a role to play.
And housing comes into play with that.
KPKT, you're talking about upskilling, manpower ministry, human resource ministry, and also youth and sports, because they also have that responsibility to upskill youths. And then you've got the home ministry in terms of immigration, in terms of
migrants coming in.
Migrants coming in.
Right.
For example, upskilling in the automotive industry last year helped to replace about 25,000 workers in the automotive, foreign workers in the automotive industry with locals. So it's across the board.
And the economics affairs, whatever it's
Ministry of Economic Affairs, Ministry of
You go back
Finance.
to the state government.
So,
they have their roles too.
67% of the respondents on the Lite.my website said that the cost of living, the rising cost of living, should be the first thing that Pakatan Harapan focuses on. Now, for the average man on the street, that is really the number one thing. I mean, I speak to people, and every person I meet talks about how things are more expensive, rent is going up. So I'm going to start with you. I'm going to go around the table and ask you guys, when you're talking to someone who has brought up the issue of the rising cost of living in relation to the performance of the Pakatan Harapan government, how would you address it?
Difficult, actually, because of expectations again. I think if they tell me, if they ask me why this is happening,
Right.
I would tell them it's so difficult to bring prices down without relating it to the growth of the country. Okay, a cost of a piece of roti canai, which cost probably 40 cents 20 years ago probably, is now 1 ringgit 20 cents. To me, it looks a bit reasonable considering how the country has grown. I don't think it's expensive. Or cost of mee goreng, kway teow, fried kway teow. So how do you address it? What do you tell them?
Yeah. What do you say to that, in response? Because, you know, if we are struggling to make sense of this, how would the government respond to the rising cost? What would the government have to say?
Go back to salaries, but salaries, I mean, creating employment. People are losing their jobs now. So how do you keep them in employment? How do you raise their salaries?
I'm going to cross
so
over to...
are you going to talk of reducing corporate tax to pay out more to the people? I don't know. How much can reduce?
How would you respond?
So I would say, just because of that activism background, you know, I think this is an issue definitely that people need to keep the government in check. Number one, you have to be able to get information, because I think part of the frustration and anxiety also comes from maybe not really seeing what's happening. What are some of these measures? Are these the relevant measures for you know, different segments of society? I think actually there is a role to play for people in terms of employment, because I think, I mean, we all know unions have been pretty much killed over the years. There's so little representation when it comes to you know, having your voices heard as employees. It's really a struggle, and especially when you see the economies, you know, like digital economy is the one where you have the least protection. I think there is a room to play for some kind of organizing. I'm you know, not agitating, but I think it needs to come back, because how else do you then say, look, we are in a situation where it's unfair to the employees, and that has to come up as well in that conversation at the same time. So I would probably, you know, talk about this with any individuals in these two
So what about you?
This conversation reminds me of stories my late father used to tell us when he was in his teenage years. One bowl of wantan mee was 2 cents.
Yeah.
And now,
2 cents?
Yes.
Wow.
This is the 1920s. Okay, but now in 100 years later, we are paying 7 ringgit, 6 ringgit, or even 5 ringgit, depending where you are in Malaysia, for a bowl of wantan mee. But the whole point here is that if someone asks me, prices of things have gone up, I say yes, that represents growth. Okay, has there been a massive spike like in Venezuela or Ecuador, a 1,000,000% inflation rate? That hasn't happened. Okay, do we really have starving people on the street deliberately? No. Okay, I think that we did a story on soup kitchens, and you know what? We were spoiled for choice in KL. There are 15 soup kitchens running on any day in the streets of KL. Okay, so if someone is starving in the streets of KL, it is a deliberate attempt. It cannot be accidental. Okay, but what I'm saying is that we are addressing the cost of living because everyone anecdotally tells, you know, the price of goods used to be 25 cents less, used to be 45 cents less. To me, I see the 25 cents more or 45 cents more as a representation of growth. Now, the government take the policy, address it, go backwards and says, look, how do we help these people pay for the extra 45 cents, pay for the extra 25 cents? If unions are the way to go, if organizations are the way to go, bringing in more foreign investors are the way to go, let's have it as policy. We do not have any policy that we know of, that I know of, that addresses salary growth, which would directly address cost of living.
Minimum wage would be one of that.
One of it, yes, which was $50 addressed.
$50 addressed. I mean, it's interesting that you should talk about soup kitchens, because the soup kitchens I observe at my churches, you would think that it's the homeless who will come, well-dressed office workers who come with their children, they get fed there, and then they send their children to school and they go to work, and then they say, at least I save money on one meal. And these are people who come with cars.
Because they need to save it?
They need to save it. They need to save it to pay for tuition, pay for rent, or whatnot lah. Or Hari Raya is coming around the corner, so we need to save money for that. You see, I think we should probably be less. We should be more self-sufficient. We should be less reliant on imports. We should look into growing or manufacturing. Our food security is rubbish. We don't have food security.
Yes, that's true.
We should probably, the Agriculture Ministry, Salurin Ayub, should probably be focused on that, and see how we can offer, how we can grow these industries and provide jobs. At the end of the day, it's about probably employment.
15 years ago, a seed bank was started. The seed bank remained the word seed bank. It is seedless.
It's not been watered.
It is seedless.
It hasn't grown and no fruits coming out from there yet. Well, okay. So we're going to continue our conversation about the economy, but we're going to be taking a look at mega projects and how they've been scaled down or cut completely. That's coming up on the next episode of Front Page, the Pakatan Harapan report card right here on Lite.